So today we're jumping into something really tough. We're deconstructing a powerful dialogue that wrestles with extremism, with history, and with a community's urgent search for a way forward. And it all begins with one person's profound crisis of faith.
It all kicks off with this heart-wrenching question from a Muslim woman. She's completely torn apart by the terrorist acts being committed by people claiming to share her faith. But it's not just that. She's also deeply troubled by what she sees as hypocrisy and silence from her own community leaders. She basically asks, look, the Quran says killing one innocent person is like killing all of humanity. So why isn't the outrage from inside our community just as loud? And that question, well, that's the raw nerve that this entire analysis is built around.
Now, the way this is answered, it's not what you'd expect. We're not diving into politics or theology, not at first. Instead, we get this really powerful metaphor that's meant to completely reframe the problem. It's all about the crushing weight of the past.
Okay, so picture this. There's this massive, old mansion, totally falling apart. It's been abandoned for centuries. The original owners are long, long gone. But you, out of this deep sense of pride for your ancestors, you walk right up to it and you declare, "This place is mine. I am a descendant of the people who built it."
But here's the catch, right? When you claim that mansion, you don't just get the bragging rights. You get all of its baggage. You voluntarily take on its debts. And in this story, that means you're now on the hook for a 10 crore loan. And even worse, you're also inheriting the moral debt for the 70 bodies that your ancestors buried in the foundation.
Which leads to the big question. Why would you do that? Why would anyone choose to inherit something that gives you no shelter, no food, no future, only debt and this terrible burden of having to answer for atrocities you had nothing to do with? The argument here is that this kind of attachment to a glorious past is a total trap. It forces the current generation to constantly be on the defensive, answering for the sins of a history that can't possibly change.
So that whole mansion idea? It's the setup for a much bigger point. From that metaphor about the past, the analysis pivots to diagnosing the internal problems that are causing stagnation and creating real vulnerability right now in the present. And here's one of the main arguments. A huge mix-up has happened over time. You've got this timeless, universal Islamic philosophy on one hand, and then you've got the cultural customs from ancient Arabia, from a very specific time and place. And the problem is, they've gotten all tangled up. The source argues that a lot of what's practiced today isn't actually core religious philosophy, but just old cultural habits that have been mistakenly treated as sacred. And this isn't just some academic debate. It has real, on-the-ground consequences, especially when it comes to education. You know, the source points to this inspection at a madrasa in Bahrain where senior students, get this, couldn't even write their own names in English. When you have a curriculum that's afraid of science and teaches languages with very little practical use today, you're leaving a whole generation unprepared for the modern world.
And if you want to see the real-world outcome of all this, well, it's summed up in this one, just gut-wrenching finding from the Sachar Committee report in India. It found that while Muslims were underrepresented pretty much everywhere that matters, in parliament, in the courts, in universities, there was one place where they were tragically overrepresented: prisons.
You see where this is going, right? It leads to a truly heartbreaking idea. The argument is when you strip a community of its power to compete with knowledge, with ideas, with innovation, what's left? For some, the only power they feel they have left is the gun. It's the brute force that remains when all the other doors seem to be shut.
But hold on, this is crucial. This isn't just an internal problem. The source is super clear that powerful outside forces have been playing a really cynical and frankly destructive game here for their own strategic reasons.
Okay, so let's rewind to the Cold War. The US is terrified of the Soviets expanding into Afghanistan. So what do? They team up with Saudi Arabia. And with a whole lot of money and political muscle, they start funding and promoting this super extreme, violent brand of Islam. The goal? Create a fanatical army to bleed the Soviets dry. But what happens when that war is over? Those fighters didn't just disappear. They scattered across the globe, taking that ideology to Kashmir, to Chechnya, and planting the very seeds that would later grow into ISIS.
And there's this quote, often attributed to Hillary Clinton, that just nails it perfectly. When you breed snakes in your backyard, it is stupid to imagine they will not bite you. That's exactly what happened. This grand geopolitical strategy created a monster they couldn't control. The snakes they raised to fight one enemy turned around and bit the hands that fed them, sparking a global terror problem that we're still dealing with today.
All right, so we've looked at the internal issues, the external manipulation.
It's all pretty heavy stuff. But now the conversation shifts. It pivots to a solution. And it all boils down to one incredibly powerful idea.
The argument is simple. You can't fight darkness with more darkness. The only thing that beats the darkness of ignorance and fanaticism is light. And that light, the source says, is knowledge or ilm. In fact, it's pointed out that within Islamic tradition itself, knowledge is held in such high regard that it's considered a higher pursuit even than worship or ibadah.
Okay, so how do you do it? How do you bring in that light? Well, it's not just about building a few more schools. It's about a whole cultural shift. It means prioritizing modern education, for sure, science, logic, history. But just as critical, it's about being brave enough to have open, fearless dialogue. It's about throwing open the windows and doors of the community, to let some fresh air and new ideas blow through. And finally, making a real effort to separate that timeless wisdom from outdated cultural baggage.
And here's the warning that comes with that. Think about a room that's been sealed shut for years. No fresh air. What happens? It starts to get stale. It starts to stink. The same thing happens with a community. If you shut yourself off from the outside world, from criticism, from new ideas, you just become an echo chamber. And in that sealed room, sickness and bad ideas are bound to grow. Ventilation isn't just nice, it's essential for health.
So, it all comes back to this one fundamental choice. Are you going to stay chained to the debts of that crumbling old mansion, defending a past you can't even change? Or are you going to choose to step into the light of knowledge and build something new, a future free from all that weight? It's an unsettling question, for sure, but the answer, as this analysis makes so clear, is everything.